Hi everyone and welcome to the Strengthen Up event organized by Up Zurich and to this wonderful celebration of World Mental Health Day. And from my side, welcome to today's session on emotions and everything related to how we can navigate difficult emotions at work and how we can develop our emotional skills. I'm really excited that you chose to join this session and excited about spending the next 30 minutes together with you. And this wouldn't be a true session about emotions if I wouldn't take this opportunity to ask you how you're feeling right now. So I invite you now to take a moment to check in, to see how you're doing, how you're feeling, what emotions you might be experiencing, how your energy level is, and just give yourself a moment to sit in that brief check-in. I can definitely share that I'm around the 6 right now. It's been a pretty wonderful day talking about a lot of important topics that I enjoy to talk about with a lot of amazing humans. And it's also been quite sunny, so I'm really trying to cherish that. And yeah, I hope that by the end of it, we're all either around the 9 or a 1 on this lovely ship scale. And a little bit about myself. I am Roxana, and this is the lovely Llama Luigi. I bring him along because he tends to brighten people's days, and I hope he has the same effect on you as well today. He's a very interesting llama. I can share a bit more about him if you're curious. As for myself, I am a coach and psychologist with a background in cognitive behavioral psychotherapy. So I've been doing this work for about 10 years now, a bit more, and my current focus is on everything emotional health related, building emotional skills and talking about the experience of being human. That means talking about all the joys and amazing moments from our experience, but also all the challenges and obstacles and ambiguity that life throws at us, and how we can develop amazing human skills, emotional skills, communication skills, and leadership skills to help us navigate all of that. And in today's session, I really hope you find this as a safe space where you can give yourself a half an hour of reflection on you and your emotions, and take this time to really check in and understand how you're doing and be as present as possible. You can leave your cameras on or off, and you can also just use this time to interact with each other, use the chat as you feel it's relevant to you. And if you have any questions, you can always stop and I will answer those questions as well, or put them in the chat and I will find the time at the end that we can address them. So with that in mind, I think it's time for us to go deeper into the topic of emotions. So in exploring how we can skillfully navigate difficult emotions at work, this is our first stop. This is our starting point. We take a very deep look at the relationship we have with our emotions right now. Because even if we consider this or not until this point, we are in a relationship with our emotions. We have been throughout our lives, and we're going to continue to be in a relationship with how we're feeling and what our emotions are. And so the more we know about this relationship, the better prepared we are to really understand how we can improve it, what skills and abilities we're needing, what's missing there, and what's getting in our way for really being able to navigate those difficult emotions in the best possible way, in a way that serves us. And so that's why I invite you now to take a moment to think about what does your relationship with your emotions look like right now, and what goes into that relationship. And you have these 3 supporting questions that would really be important for us to reflect on. I'm going to guide you through them, and as we do, please just take a moment to think about your own relationship and how that plays out. So think about what you learned about your emotions growing up. And this can be anything from explicit rules that were around that, right? You shouldn't be feeling like this in this moment. It's not logical, for example, rules that might not be helpful. Or, oh, you're too negative. You shouldn't be so negative. You should only focus on the positive side of things. or you're too sensitive, or you're too in your feelings. These might have been rules that we have learned that are not really supportive, but that's later on informed how this relationship looks like. Another good example of what we learn is by seeing what the important adults in our life are doing, and think about how conflict was managed in your household, for example. Was there no conflict at all because maybe they avoided conflict altogether, and so that became something really scary that we have to run away from? Or was there a lot of conflict with a lot of anger being expressed and yelling and raised voices and so on? So the way, for example, adults navigate conflict is a good point to start for us to investigate what might have I learned from seeing my parents or grandparents or the adults in my life react to their emotions and to each other in that situation. So from explicit rules about how we're supposed to feel, to what we saw and learned, to society rules that you can also think about. So I can share from my example, a rule that I heard a lot growing up is we have to be very careful of what the people around us are thinking about us. So, right, the fear of being judged was very present, and so in consequence, there were a lot of rules about how you're supposed to feel and think and behave, and that really limited our ability to maybe express a lot of the emotions that we had, or only allowed to express those emotions in specific situations. So maybe this example also helps you reflect a bit more on what did you learn about emotions growing up? And then, how do you think about your emotions and how do you react towards them? So, if you have a difficult emotion at work, what do you tell yourself about that, right? What is the story that you use in the present moment when you are confronted with a difficult emotion? Do you say, I shouldn't be feeling like this right now, or this emotion is not appropriate for work, or I'm not allowed to express this emotion because if I do, something bad will happen, or others will judge me, and so on. How do you react towards your emotions? What do you do in those situations, right? For example, when we feel anxious, our reaction sometimes might be that we either avoid altogether and we go into procrastination, or we go full on leaning into that emotion and we go towards perfectionism. And we want everything to be perfect because we're anxious and stressed about it. What about anger, right? What are your reactions towards anger? Do you tend to bottle it in? Or do you tend to unfiltering let it out, right? Do you tend to express anger in an aggressive maybe way? So just gather as much information as you can now. I'm going to give you a few more moments to really deeply reflect on this, because it's important to have a clear starting point in our relationship with our emotions that we can then use to build up those emotional skills that we want to have not only at work, but in our life in general. So now that we have a greater understanding on how the relationship with our emotion looks like, we want to explore the reactions that we have towards our emotions a bit deeper, because this is important and it's easier for us to spot how we're dealing with our emotion in the present. And I want to start here by saying nobody likes to feel pain, suffering, and discomfort. No human being on this planet likes to be confronted with those. And that's where the challenge comes in, right? Also, based on what we're learning about our emotions, our reactions tend to be in these two categories, right? We tend to either avoid feeling what we're feeling or do something to fix our behaviors, our emotions through behaviors. So when it comes to avoidance, probably you already have in your mind, right? Procrastination is one way to avoid. I just don't want to think about it anymore. I'm pretending like it's not there, or it's not important, or it's not valid, or it's not logical, or it's not rational. And so because I'm not seeing this emotion as it's supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be feeling this because I am feeling it anyways, I'm going to do all my best to avoid what I'm feeling. And this takes a lot of energy. Avoidance is not an easy thing for us to do. A lot of the times it's an active process, even though it feels like it's running in the background, right? Because the emotion is still there. It wants to come to the surface, and we invest a lot of time and energy to actually push it down somewhere so we don't feel anymore what we're feeling. So just take a moment to see if avoidance is something that you're doing in some situations when you experience difficult emotions. Now, on the other side, we have attempts to fix our emotions. And this happens every time when we say to ourselves, I'm really not feeling good about this. I'm anxious or stressed or angry or guilty or ashamed. So I'm going to do something to feel better, no matter what I do, right? So a lot of the times, the things that we do seem pretty okay to do, right? Even if I say I'm stressed, I'm going to go for a run to feel less stressed, or I'm going to go for a walk to clear my head, or I'm going to do exercise, or I'm going to call someone, right? So we do behaviors that seem to be supportive, and they might be. We're not saying it's black or white, but we're saying is we're kind of missing the link between what should I be doing and what I'm doing, and we're missing the point in why do I do that behavior? Do I do that behavior because it's something that I want to do, because it's aligned with what I'm valuing in that moment, what's important to me? Or do I do that behavior because it's very hard for me to tolerate how I'm feeling right now and I'm trying to escape that, and I'm escaping it by doing something about it? It's a big difference in our motivation to our emotions. Does that go towards I'm fixing it, I'm doing this to feel less bad, or I'm doing this because it's something that I want to do and I think it feels supportive, right? Where do I come from? It's a good point of reference for that. So again, take a moment to reflect on how you're dealing with your emotions, where with some emotions, for example, we might tend to avoid more. For example, anxiety is one of those. With some emotions, we might tend to fix more, right? Sadness or intense sadness is one of those emotions where I feel like that. Maybe I go and do something, which again, it depends a lot on our motivation. So reflecting on all of this, and in our starting point, we're going to now explore some important ideas that can guide us through the next phase. And here they are, the 3 ideas that would guide us then in building the strategies that would help us navigate difficult emotions. Right? The first kind of universal truth is we will experience difficult emotions in our lives. We don't have to want it. We don't have to like how we're feeling, but it is part of what it means to be humans. You were built for emotions. We have some emotions that are more primal, right? Like anxiety and anger. They tend to come from a survival instinct. So we're going to have difficult emotions. We're not living protected by the reality that keeps changing and is complex and ambiguous sometimes. Other humans come in interaction with us. So it's really, really hard to live life protecting ourselves for not feeling anything negative all the time. So that being in mind, to be human is to feel we're going to have difficult emotions. Our emotions are not our enemies. And treating them like something that we're meant to fight or to get away from or to avoid is really not the way for us to build deeper, healthier, supportive relationships with our emotions. Because if we treat them like our animals, we're going to see them like something very negative that we have to not be in the same space with. And emotions are actually something very different that are relevant to us and very important to who we are as human beings. And the third one is the one we've been already looking at. We need to develop better relationships with our emotions. That's why we looked at it as a starting point, where we're at in that exploration, and now where we want to go. And then we're going to see exactly the next steps in doing that. So here we're going to look at exactly that, what strategies can support us in navigating difficult emotions at work. And I've prepared 3 strategies that I think are quite useful and impactful in doing that. But before we take a moment to really look into the strategies, I invite you to take a few moments for reflection and to think about the last time when you experienced a difficult emotion at work, and be as specific about it as you can. What was the context when this emotion came? What exactly were you feeling? How did that emotion, for example, manifest in your body? How would you describe that emotion to someone else? And how did you handle it? what did you actually do in that situation with that emotion? So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to really reflect on this and write down. Journaling and writing down is always helpful to help our mind focus, because we cannot think as fast as we write. So we're forcing essentially our mind to slow down a bit and to be a bit more structured in the context, in the content that it's delivering. So writing down really helps us, bring more clarity when sometimes our mind feels chaotic. So it's also a strategy that I recommend. But for this, let's just take a few moments to reflect on the last time you experienced a difficult emotion at work. So the example that you now reflected on with the last time you experienced a difficult emotion, you can use that and let it be your situation that you work throughout the rest of the session. So you can use that example, and we're going to apply the strategies that are coming up next to your specific situation. So whenever you're seeing now the strategies, think about, well, in that situation, how can I apply this? How can that be useful to me? And the first strategy that we're going to talk about is recognizing our emotions. So what exactly am I really feeling? And a lot of the times, I'm not sure if you can recognize this in yourself or you can see it in other people, but it's really, really, really hard to know exactly what I'm experiencing in that moment. And that's also because emotions sometimes are very powerful. They tend to overwhelm us sometimes. And truthfully, they never kind of come alone. So we usually have a big emotion and sometimes a few smaller ones that kind of end up into an emotional experience. So the more precise and specific we can be with our emotions, the better. And for that purpose, I brought you here what's called the feelings wheel, which can help you navigate your emotional landscape. And basically, it utilizes the power of language. I want you to think about this as a dictionary for your emotions, to help you decode and define and understand what I'm feeling specifically in that situation. And this will also help you develop what we call emotional granularity, which is our specific ability to label and differentiate emotions as precisely as we can. Because think about it, even in this situation, right? It's not the same if I feel surprise in a context, if my surprise is actually underneath of it is excitement and I'm feeling energetic. That can be true in one situation, but in another situation, I can feel surprised and actually I'm a bit confused and I feel that everything here is very unclear and I'm in this cloud of confusion. And sometimes we feel surprised and we're actually in shock and we're feeling incredibly uncomfortable. So even with an emotion like surprise that a lot of the times can have positive or negative connotations, we don't know how it will show up, it can have a lot of layers underneath. So that's why it's important for us to be able to play around and really understand, if I go a layer deeper, what do I find there? Think about it like peeling an onion, right? The more you take away the layers, the more you can see, and there's so much complexity to it. It's the same with our emotions, but we need supportive tools like this to help us decipher and decode and really understand what is going on there. So here you have another tool to help you really look a bit deeper into your emotions and be able to differentiate what's there. This is the anger iceberg, right? So in a situation when I'm feeling angry, looking underneath may actually show me that I'm actually feeling rejected, and that feeling shows up as anger, or sometimes helplessness is a big difficult feeling to deal with, and so might show up as anger as well. Or other times underneath the anger is actually a feeling of being threatened, and because of that I'm feeling this powerful anger at the surface, right? And so I think it's really important for us to just be able to be specific and remember that emotions are very contextualized. So we're not talking about how am I feeling in general. We can look at, levels of satisfaction or well-being, but in situations when we have difficult emotions, challenging emotions, hard emotional experiences, we want to be able to say, this is what's there and this is what's underneath, right? So in this moment, when I'm feeling what I'm feeling, what actually might be there that I need to specify and be precise about, because again, the more information I have, the better prepared I am to navigate those emotions. So recognizing emotions and developing our emotional granularity. So the second strategy is really built around the question of what if our emotions are a signal or a sign or a message that we're actually on the right track. And of course, the first message that our emotions are sending to us is this idea that we need to pay attention. So think about it as if you were driving your car and you see all the stop signs and the driving signs on the street. Some of them are saying slow down, some of them are saying be cautious, some of them are maybe saying take a right, not a left, or stop here, right? That's exactly what our emotions are trying to do as well. They're saying you need to be careful and you need to pay attention and you need to look at the message behind what I'm trying to show you, right? And always a good question is, what can I learn from this emotion right now? If I look at this emotion from the perspective of being a researcher or being an observer or being a detective, whichever one fits you, as opposed to trying to judge or evaluate what's happening. Because whenever we use the question why, it can be from a place of judgment or it can be from a place of curiosity. Sometimes we say, why am I feeling like this? As if I'm not supposed to be feeling this. Why is it here? Why is it present? And other times we're saying, why am I feeling like this? With a sense of curiosity and wonder about what might be underneath this emotion. And so each of our emotions can have a distinct profile with a distinct message. Of course, this conversation is more complex, but just to give you a bit of indication of where your emotions might be pointing you towards, think about anxiety. Anxiety is an emotion that points a lot towards the future. We usually feel anxious in situations where we start to think about potential scenarios that might happen and the negative consequences of those scenarios. So in the context of work, we might be thinking, I have to do a presentation. What if this goes badly? What if I'm not prepared enough? What if I don't know how to answer the questions from my colleagues? What would they think? What would my manager think? What if everyone realizes I'm not so capable to do this job and I end up being fired? Right? And sometimes that's exactly how our mind works. It goes from a small thing, right? It starts here and it keeps building up to really negative scenarios. And we sometimes live in that space of anxiety pointing us to really negative futures. And we're trying to see what is the message behind it. And a lot of the times the message is, this is important to you and you care about it and you care about doing a good job. So anxiety is a lot about the future and about the importance of what we're being fearful about. If we take sadness or intense sadness or the emotion of depression, that's a lot of relationship to the past and a lot of relationship to loss. So a lot of the times when we feel sad, we can feel sad because of a loss that has actually happened. So I lost maybe a relationship, I lost a job, right? I lost maybe a colleague that has moved to another team. So those are things that have happened in the future. But a lot of other times we feel that loss, even if it's just a perceived loss. So I imagine how it would be if I would get that promotion, that I didn't get it. And so it's a perceived loss that I have to deal with. Or something that I want and I imagine for myself, it just doesn't end up happening in reality. And then it's a difficult moment for me to adapt. Anger, for example, it's really related to our boundaries and limits and our moral and ethical code. So a lot of the times we tend to feel anger in situations where we perceive something being as unfair, unjust, not correct, not morally okay, or where we try to set a boundary and it's being crossed by other people, right? So a lot of the times in a meeting, maybe you keep getting interrupted by someone and then anger tends to build up and wants to come to the surface. That's a lot of the times related to how would I like to be treated, what respect means to me. So these are just some of the emotions that we tend to face quite often. And I now invite you to think about the situation that you've been reflecting on. What kind of message does your emotion have behind it? What can you learn from that emotion in that situation? And how can you carry this learning in the future as well? So now that we looked at how we can recognize and be precise with our emotions, and also we looked at how we can understand the message that our emotions are bringing, we're looking at our third strategy that goes along with redefining our emotional reaction. And I invite you to think about how you want to react or how you're reacting when you're feeling a difficult emotion as your first draft, right? And the idea here is to question how the quality of that draft itself, right? Is this something that you want people to read? Is this something that you would publish if this would be a book or a draft of a book? Is it something that you really want to put out there for yourself and for the world to experience? If the answer is no, and it's usually no if we react impulsively in the face of our emotions, or if you go based on our automatic responses, which can be, right, again, avoidance or fixing or just letting our emotion there and putting it out without reflecting first or taking steps to understand it, it might not be something that we want. And so the idea here is that we keep revising, right, our draft. We're allowed to do that. It's not about having a first reaction that we might not like. It's about giving ourselves a chance to really revise how we want to react. And here, a good question to do that is, how can I react in this situation that will best serve me, my values, and my goals? And values here is a big topic that we don't really have a lot of time to cover today, but it's a big topic that I would really invite you to reflect on, because values are something that really help us and guide us in choosing the right thing for us over the easy thing. Right, so that's why sometimes we can navigate the why behind why is it worth it for me to sit with this difficult emotion, and how can I react based on it, even though it's tough. Because values help us see, for example, in a situation when I have to complete something at work, but I'm feeling anxious about it. If my value might be curiosity, I can put that into the mix and say, hey, yes, this is really hard. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling anxious because this is important to me and I want it to go well, right? So I know the message behind it. But instead of procrastinating, which might be my initial reaction, how can I use curiosity here to help me in this situation? What can I be curious about when it comes to this task? And then modulate my response based on my value. So that's just one example to support you in this direction. So now if you take a moment to go back to your situation, right, to your emotion that you were experiencing at work that you reflected upon. What was your reaction and how can you refine it in a way that at the end of it you can say, hey, I really liked how I behaved there. It wasn't easy or it didn't come naturally, but I liked how I responded in that situation. And next time in the future, when I'm faced with that situation or a similar one, I would know how to respond in a way that I like. So we have explored quite a few things together today in this short session. We looked at our starting point, right? How does the relationship with our emotion look like right now? We also try to understand the reactions that might not be supporting us. We try to understand that our emotions are not our enemies and we want to build better relationships with our emotions. And then we looked at these 3 strategies, right, that can help us do that. Really questioning, what am I feeling? What's the message behind it? And what kind of response do I want to choose in this situation? And these are the 3 strategies that I think it's good to think about also as a work in progress, as something that we can keep practicing and looking at and reflecting upon, because if this is something that we're doing now, developing our emotional skills, it's not supposed to come naturally. It's not supposed to be easy because we're learned to react to our emotions in a very specific way. We have automatisms that come at play, and here we're saying, let's change all that. So it's going to be an exercise that requires a bit of effort and our attention and focus in order for us to be able to keep refining how we navigate this relationship with our emotions. And now, as an endpoint, I really invite you to reflect on what you're taking away from our session today. So, what is one thing that you feel, based on everything that we've discussed, can help you improve your relationship with your emotions? It can be as small or big as you want to. It can be more of a reflection or more of an action, depending on what stuck with you, right? But I think it's always useful to have one thing clear and say, this, I think doing this or thinking about this or sitting with this idea will help me then improve the relationship with our emotions. And if you want to share with us, that would be wonderful as well. And this is just to consolidate everything that we've experienced together today. And now at the end of our session, I really just want to take a brief moment to check in with you again and see how you're feeling right now. What is one word that would describe your emotion in this moment? It can be energized or curious or excited or maybe a bit tired. Doesn't really matter. It's just, again, giving yourself a chance to check in and see how you're feeling right now. And if there's any questions, I am more than happy to take a few moments to answer those. But from my side, I'm really thankful that you are here with me and with us today to talk about such an important topic, and again, to celebrate World Mental Health Day. Thank you, everyone.